We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
It's a question of taste with you, well, if you've gone sour, you want the world plus everything, but you won't work an hour. And now your questions are guilt creeping and you go and buy her flowers. You throw away the dreams we had, boy, I won't allow it. I said we're gonna fall out. Let's see you get out. I think we're gonna fall out. So shut your mouth.
Good morning. Welcome to NUFC Matters, the professionals with me, Mitch and Stu. Good morning, chaps.
Morning, mate. How are you?
Good to see you, Stu. You were on a vacation. You're on your jollies. Where are you? It's just apologies for his picture because he's trying to get decent internet where he is. Where are you, Stu?
At the minute, I'm in Tenerife. I was in Munich earlier in the week, and then Tenerife, and then back to Dubai for the weekend.
Good stuff. Well, we can hear you loud and clear. We're only doing an hour this morning, so Stu can get back out to do more important things than broadcast on the internet. Newcastle United winning 1-0 away at Fulham, and a game which saw a wonderful goal by Bruno in his 100th performance. We'll come to Bruno, I'm sure, in due course. But Mitch, that's a great win. And keeps Newcastle in amongst the runners and riders for a European slot at the end of the season.
All about heart and desire in that second half, really. I don't know what that first half was about. That was quite a bizarre half of football. We were not connected at all. Didn't look like we were interested at times even. And then after half time, we suddenly found a little bit of bait. And as the longer the game went on and the more we clawed back in it, I think there was only ever going to be one more likely winner. Like us through the week, Fulham will be ruined, missing chances. But at the same time, we kept them at bay. Dubravka made a couple of important saves. And I think, we'll have to give credit where it's due. And we'll look back at that now, and when the 3 games we've had, 7 points from the 3 games, suddenly doesn't look so bad anymore. I think if you'd said win, draw, everybody would go, yeah, take that. So we're going win, draw, win. And okay, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty at all. Like I say, that first half was bloody awful. Even the second half at times was painful. But the heart, the absolute heart that was showed, to scramble back into it, get a toehold in the game and then take advantage of it. We had a 15-minute period for about 5 minutes before we had the disallowed goal, and then up to when we scored, and then probably for about another 5 minutes after, we were the only team likely to score in that period.
Stu, you watched the game yesterday, and it was a game of 2 halves. First half, Newcastle didn't really turn up, and I think what really stands out for me is just that, as Mitch says, it was the heart. It took an Eddie Howe impromptu rollicking though, which is something which I've never seen before, certainly not on the pitch. There was a drinks break, which obviously we'll have to have because of Ramadan, and it was Eddie Howe at his probably his most animated and angry I've ever seen him. And rightly so, because he wasn't getting the performance he wanted. And he talked about it. You guys won't have seen his interview on Match of the Day, but he talked about it on there. And he just said, sometimes you have to do that. We don't have to do it very often. But from my perspective, we weren't given it and we weren't doing what we needed to do. And he said, I know the reasons why. But that doesn't get us where we want to be. And he says, the effort in the second half was much better. So a big admittance from Howe on that, which I thought was great, but it was good to see him do it.
It's important that he does, but it's also very important that he does it occasionally, because if he was to do it every week, it wouldn't have the same effect. So because they are few and far between, then it does have the impact, or the desired impact. And you've seen their performance in the second half was better. But the most important thing yesterday was getting 3 points. And they did that. And if we're talking about this time last week, the 3 games that we'd had, we've got 7 points from. Look at our little mini league. Wolves, how many points have they taken? Villa, how many? Not Villa. Who else is it? Brighton, how many points have these taken? West Ham, how many points have these taken? We've taken more than all of them. It's only Chelsea that I first said could be our danger for this European place that have taken the same amount of points. So I think we're in a fantastic position. The momentum's there. They've got a full week off now. There's no midweek games. There's no European games. There's no international games. The rest who they need to be rested. And then we've got 7 games to push. And I think they are genuinely, for the first time, taking it 1 game at a time and getting through this next game against Tottenham. That'll be the marker in the sand. And that would just, to me, the rest of the teams that we've got to play, most of them are, for want of a better phrase, already thinking about the holidays, aren't they? Because they've got nothing left to play for apart from those at the bottom, and we should be beating them. I know we haven't yet, but I think the difference we had yesterday is we had a stronger bench compared to the game against Everton. We had 2 players certainly that could come on and impact the game and make a difference in the forward positions, and that was Barnes and Anderson. And I thought those 2 coming on yesterday swung the game in our favour massively as well.
Yeah, interesting. Good to see Alan Thompson in the chat. Alan predicted a horrendous defeat. It was never in doubt for me. I thought it would go down there and win. I thought it would be 2-1. That was my prediction. I genuinely thought Newcastle would win that game, and then they have done. But a clean sheet is just as important, Mitch. It's something we haven't seen a great deal of, but great to see a clean sheet with Dan Burn playing exceptionally well at centre half again
and leading from centre half. And I think that's the difference. He's becoming a standout, not just because his play's improved as a centre back rather than left back, but he seems to be keeping Hall on his toes at left back. He seems to be communicating better with Dubravka. I know Dubravka still worries me at times. I think there's leadership and there's communication and there's better things happening in the back, and it stems from Dan Burn.
Stu, Dan Burn leading by example yesterday.
Well, that's it. He's took the armband and he's took the responsibility on it, and he's took it like a duck to water. And although we know that he's limited playing wise, I don't think we can doubt his contribution to the group as a whole. And if you've got someone like Dan Burn shouting at you, telling you what to do, you're more inclined to do it, aren't you, than someone like Bruno Fernandes, for example. So it's getting a captain can make a big difference. And I think credit to him because he has had a lot of criticism. But we're now seeing him more of his natural position, and he's responding with top-class performances as long as it continue.
Yeah, superb performance from him. Alan Thompson must have Mac and blood in him, says Geordie 2 for life. Now he tries to be a realist. And a win like yesterday, for somebody who predicted a 3-0 defeat, is often a little bit more exciting. No coincidence, we look better at centre, but Burn looks better at centre back and playing an actual left back in Hall at left back, says Chippers.
I think, if you don't mind us staying there, I think we saw yesterday a couple of things about why Eddie's taking time with Hall. Because there's a couple of times he looked a little uncertain. There was a couple of times he didn't seem switched on. I think at one moment when he got the ball in possession in the box and he went to play it, pass it, kick it, he didn't really know what to do with it and ended up squidging out for a throw. And I think that's imagine if that's taken Eddie all season to get comfortable with him at left back in that situation. It might be a little insight on what Eddie's been trying to do with Hall. Maybe we've been jumping all over too many conspiracy theories because we've had a hell of a season where we've had lots more questions than answers, and still some with more injury news from yesterday. You know, it's super frustrating, but organisation was the strength of our back line. I think we now see what Pope brings in many different ways, but also Burns stepping up to deliver that with no Trippier in the team and no Lascelles in the team. I think it's fantastic to see him be able to step up like that.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on that, Stu?
Sorry, I was watching something else. What you started with?
I knew this would happen this morning with the alcohol you've got. Yeah, I mean, he mentioned Dan Burn, obviously, you know, leading from example, but Lewis Hall, he was talking about Lewis Hall and how Eddie Howe has, you know, given him time, and Mitch says he can understand why he's probably given him time, because there are certain things that he's seen Lewis Hall not do and do that maybe it prompts, you know, that's why, you know, he hasn't given Lewis Hall the chance this season. He is still developing. He's not having a good time with his internet. We'll
Screams into a telephonic abyss.
10 o'clock in the morning is no good for the professionals, I've got to be perfectly honest, but it's the only way we could do it this morning, because believe you me, 6 o'clock tonight with Stu would have been like red wine Steve Wraith on the fans forum.
But I'm off to start again at a barbecue in a couple of hours, so it would have been the bloody pairway, probably.
Would have been high. Do you guys think if we had the players, Longstaff would be dropped? He's awful, says Barry. Anderson getting better. Willock now out. There's no one else available. I saw somebody else post slightly earlier there about, you know, picking out players. Look, it's a collective, and that's the way Eddie looks at it, isn't it, Mitch? It's difficult.
We've gone binary again about players. He's awful. He's terrible. Get him dropped. And then he spends 6 games out the team, and suddenly people are saying, get him back in. I think he's out of form. I think it's a fair word to use about Longstaff is he's not playing at the level that we know he can. There's times he seems second phase balls. His distribution sometimes isn't as good as we've seen it. And he's certainly not making, although yesterday he made a couple, but that's been the exception to the rule. He's good at making penetrative runs, late runs when he gets into the box. And it just hasn't been happening this season. And it happened yesterday a couple of times, which was good to see. But I think he's out of form. And yes, if we had a deeper squad with more players available, I'm quite sure he wouldn't be in the team. But like you say, Steve, it's a collective effort. Everybody's all hands to the pumps. And what you've got to say, in a season absolutely bedraggled with injuries, Longstaff, who's played through injuries and could probably have cried off himself, has put a hell of an amount of minutes in his legs. And that's aided to the team effort. And I think, yes, game to game, he doesn't look quite the same player that we know he can be. Yes, that's super frustrating. But berating him for that, and he's the seems to be, again, this rotating scapegoat target. At the minute, seems to have settled on Sean, and it'll go to somebody else soon. Dummett got it briefly after Everton from some sections, with some real mad comments like, he's ruined our season. No, it was stupid, but he's not ruined our season. Our season gets ruined over 38 games. And so, you know, I think we need to try and stop being so knee-jerk and reactionary.
Okay, I'm not sure whether I'll get Stu back. Is he in the mountains in Iraq, says Jody Toonvallife. It certainly looks like it, but no, he is definitely in Tenerife. Jules, good morning. Well said, Mitch and Alan. Eddie taking his time, knowing players aren't quite ready, despite all the armchair managers screaming for it. Hall is a talent. but we need to remember that he's still developing, which is a good point. Geordie Toomba says, Mitch, I see Lewis Hall as a midfielder, not a fullback. He has so much talent going forward, not defending.
I think that's possibly a fair shout, and that's certainly he's done his better work going forward generally. Depends what kind of if you're going to settle into a wing back formation, that's now probably where he would be better utilised as an attacking full back with a back three behind him. And we just don't know where that's going to head. But that'll obviously depend on what Eddie's thoughts are on developing systems down the line. He does seem to fall between two stools, but when we've been desperate for someone to play at left full back, and you've seen the positives he's brought in the last few games, I can see why people were frustrated why he wasn't brought straight in. But we don't see what Eddie sees week in, week out. And we'll have to trust that. We'll have to keep trusting that. We've gone by, trust the process, trust the process, trust the process. We're now all impatient with the process and want everything yesterday. And I think that's something we'll have to sort of bear in mind. But by saying that, it doesn't mean I'm happy clapping and saying that all's well in Dodge, because it isn't. And there's things that need sorted.
Stu, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You're back. Yeah, Lewis Hall, we're just talking about what his best position is. Where do you think Lewis Hall fits in best? And what the point that was being made before you got cut off was that, with Lewis Hall, you can probably see why Eddie's taking his time with him, because there are little things that he does and little ways he gets caught out of position. And, essentially that's why Eddie's probably took his time with him this season, despite the injuries.
The first thing, I think his natural position seems to be more of a wing back, but we don't play wing backs often. So then they're trying to get him into, you can see his defensive frailties yesterday positionally. But going forward, he gives us an extra threat. So you have to take the balance and think, right, if we can pick the format, the latter's going to look after itself anyway. And this is probably why they're taking so much time with him, and I'm sure we'll continue to work, and he might just save us money in the transfer window if he's able to fit in that role long term. If he can. Because
lost him again. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to work out with Stu today. It's very hit and miss, and he's not having the best of luck. And I think he just wants to get out on the drink. I'm sure.
Stu, get yourself out on the drink, mate.
I think he's doing it deliberately. He wanted to do this, which is credit to him. Like, I didn't ask him to do it; he wanted to do it. So, the Walking Wounded are doing the Toon proud, and next season we'll have a much deeper squad and probably rest the bandaged ones. 3 or 4 quality player additions will do nicely. Roger says go audio only. His audio is playing up now as well, though, Roger. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to work. Don't think Hall has the physicality to play in an Eddie Howe midfield, says Benny. And signal's not great from 11 a reef. You're not wrong, Michael. Alan says, lads, why do managers play players with injuries? Willock's not played well for at least 3 or 4 games now. We hear he's been carrying an injury. His reputation's been damaged as a player. What's your thoughts? I mean, he's had to play more than Willock. He's played Byrne, he's played Botman, he's played Longstaff, as we know, through injuries. I mean, it's because that's all he's got, isn't it?
To a point. It's a really good question. It's the question we should have been asking around Sven Botman. But we couldn't, because I think it's very obvious the club tried to cover Botman's arse a lot, because it was his decision not to go for surgery, which you've got to respect. It's an individual's right to not go under the knife. However, there's times a manager must look at the situation and think, is playing this player beneficial for the club? What worries me for Willock is there's talk about it being Achilles again. And that's what he originally went out with last season. And then we were told his delay coming back was ongoing repercussions of the rehab from the Achilles injuries. It turns out which was his hamstring, which apparently is quite a common thing. If you do one, the other starts to overcompensate and puts you at risk of damaging that. And then it was nondescript. There was no real update about why he wasn't coming back in the team. And again, a couple of curious conspiracy theories surrounded that at the time. And now here we are talking Achilles again. Now, was this the original Achilles injury? And is this another one that maybe could have had surgery originally? And if you'd had surgery originally, wouldn't be talking about this now? Is this another thing to add? And this isn't a criticism of Eddie and the medical team, but I think it's a reality. I think we need to sit down at the end of the season and go root and branch and say, right, how could we have done anything better in all of these situations? What could we have done to not have allowed this to happen? Have we contributed to this situation? Has been allowing players to try and play through injuries? Because many players can. But is it in their best interest and the squad's best interest? And so we need more info on Willock first, but it sounds like he's now done for the season again, which is super frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Being said time and time again, if you don't pick every player who has carried a knock, you would have no one in the starting 11. There's always niggles.
True.
Yep. Just talking about injuries, Stu. I mean, Alan was asking why we're playing players, when they're injured, but it's because we've got no other choice.
Yeah, well, it rolls into the Longstaff debate, doesn't it, for the criticism he's getting. And yesterday, we're in the Leeds supporters club, so it was over 200 Leeds fans there. Made such a great noise in their defeat. But the conversation was 3 Newcastle fans there, and someone said, look at Longstaff. And the other one went, aye, but he does loads of running. And the reply was, yes, chasing after the player, he's just there past them. So I started watching, and there seemed to be a lot of that, where I'm not saying he's not doing his job right. Well, but what's happening is he's being reactive rather than proactive. And if the players went past you, yes, you're doing the right thing to not go down and chase it. But if it's happening time and time again, then it's a weak link. But the reason he's getting played is because there's no one else really in that position for him. It's there to play. If you look at the injuries we've got, we just seem to getting one area fixed and then another area becomes broken, and it's just one of those seasons that should never be repeated. I don't think they can be. So the playing with injuries, it depends on the severity of the injury. We're all at different levels. There's times like, well, we've had a dead leg and we'll play and stuff like that, but this is top-end professional sport. So ultimately, it is up to the physio team and the player to believe if they're capable. Then it's the manager to decide, are they good enough to be in the team? So it's not just one person to blame if someone plays and gets injured. But we just have to, at the moment, concentrate on the positives, because we need to keep positive for the running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's true. We do need to stay positive. Let's talk about Bruno. Mitch, 100 games for Newcastle United. His social media post last night was absolutely fantastic as well. He's very, very happy. He was asked again by numerous outlets about staying at Newcastle. He says he's very happy here, and of course, the negative people will read into the fact, well, exactly what he said, exactly what Isaac says. You can't say what happens, but he's said he's happy at Newcastle. He doesn't want to leave. There's nothing to say that Newcastle, Eddie Howe said he doesn't want to leave. He was asked the question last night. We've extended his contract. All of those answers tell you that Newcastle want to keep him, as in Eddie Howe wants to keep him and he wants to stay. That doesn't mean that if a bid comes in, that Newcastle wouldn't consider it if they think it's better for the club that they let him go. And this is the same situation that Spurs found themselves in with Harry Kane. It's the same position that West Ham found themselves in with Declan Rice. If they get a bid for a player which they think is, going to benefit the club moving forward with the current FFP situation, then unfortunately it means that we may have to let him go. But there's no guarantees that it could happen. Some people might think, well, that's, we do want to keep him. So I think it was great yesterday, and he caps his 100th appearance for Newcastle United with a goal. Not the best goal he scored, but a crucial one, an important one, and one which got his team 3 points.
Very, very quick 100 appearances as well. It's something like
I know.
100 out of 107 possibles. It's like, wow, that's, you know, in a season we're talking about injuries and being worrying about him missing games with bookings. That is phenomenal. Took his goal well. I don't know what it is when he shoots. He always seems to cut the neck off the top of the ball and sort of volley it into the ground and then have it bouncing squirrely towards the keeper. But it goes in, and we all go mad, and he kisses the badge and points at it and does everything. You know, that you can't do anything else. It's a really difficult situation, and I think that the press conference with Postecoglou through the week, I thought his words were quite sensible. You know, and admirable from a manager being put on the spot by some journalist thinking he's asking them some sort of clever question about finance. And you're right, Spurs have certainly benefited from taking the bid for Kane at the right time, when he still had some book value, and they've been able to use it to change that playing style, what Postecoglou wants, and they're getting the best out of a few other players. Similarly, I think West Ham used their money wisely, but the problem for West Ham is where's their race this season? And what are they going to do in the transfer market close season? We also have the mystery of what's going to happen with sustainability rules and where's it going to go. And what's sort of almost trying to look into a crystal ball in terms of planning, and that's the challenge. The people who want to keep our blue chip players seem to be also the people who want to get rid of as much of the deadwood as we possibly can. It ain't Football Manager, it ain't that easy. And it might be a case of we can keep our blue chip players, but we've got to accept that some of those others in the squad that you're not comfortable or happy with being there, you've got to have there because it helps to keep the books balanced and helps from an FFP point of view. Or a bid comes in for a blue chip player that suddenly takes the shackles off in the transfer market for the summer. And we had another 2, 3 or 4 blue chip players and suddenly become better as a group. I would not like to see anybody go. We're building something potentially special. And you look at the relationship between Isaac, Bruno, Joe Linton when he's fit. You know, we're attacking players that make a difference. Gordon, there seems to be a cohesiveness. They like to play alongside each other. And we've added Barnes, who's done more in a handful of games than any other player in the Premier League. Scored more goals coming off the bench, had massive impact. Again, freak injury that kept him out for a ridiculous amount of time. Give him a full season. And when I was speaking to a Leicester fan over here, who told me he was far more upset about Barnes going than Maddison. Barnes was the one that hurt. And I think that's significant. So, you know, we've got the real ingredients there to have something special. We know we have. We've seen it. We saw it last season. So why would you want to break that up? But the club have got to do what's best for the club. And if somebody wants to come along and plonk a ridiculous bid in for someone, and that comes in a form where we can use that money and genuinely have a shackle-free transfer window, we might just have to suck it up, which isn't what I want to sit and say. But until we know where we stand in terms of sustainability, until we know where we stand in terms of future potential punishments for failure of the sustainability laws, whatever they may be, we're all guessing.
Thoughts on Bruno from your perspective, Stu?
Yeah, I think he showed clearly where his affection is. He's an emotional character. You know, you can see the way he plays he is, and he's controlling it well. You know, just one more game to go, isn't it? If he gets through the Tottenham game, then the 2-game ban disappears. So, but as soon as he scored, he's straight to Newcastle fans. He's badged. He's saying, which to me will be a club led answer, same as Isaac. They both refer to the project or the the way the club's grown and the part of it. That's what they signed up for. When they signed, there was no guarantee of Champions League football, but collectively they managed to get it. So I understand they've had a taste of this and they like it and they want more of it. But I think the one thing that we've got over many other teams in the league is that group togetherness, is that team spirit. And you can see that the way that they play for each other. But it's media speculation, and whether it's a conspiracy theory or just a bit of paranoia, whatever Newcastle appear to be settled, a story will come out, whether it's about the manager, whether it's about a star player. You know, we've been linked with Jose Mourinho that many times, but yet we've got a manager who I think 96, 97% of the fan base would be happy with. The board seem to be happy with him. So it's a non-story, isn't it? Yet Liverpool are going to get a manager. It's quite clear that at Man United they're going to change their manager. How come Mourinho has not been linked with them? Because it unsettles the club. And this is where we've just got to look at it and think, if people want to say what they're saying about stuff like that, let them crack on. And they'll say the same about Bruno. He's had his kids here, well, his wife did. He's loving life. And if we get here next season, he'll be here next season. You know, the player does have a say. Look what Miggy in January. The player does have a say in whether he goes or not. And we don't know the full complex intricacies of his contract, but it's going to take a hell of a bid for us to leave, for us to accept it, and for them to go and leave. I think there's only one or two clubs in world football that you'd probably see as a step up, and that's where I want to go to. Hopefully the agreement is if he does move, it's not to the Premier League club, because that would hurt a lot, watching them just like it did with the Andy Cole scenario, watching them play for someone else. But we shouldn't, and this is going on to what Mitch was talking about there, we shouldn't be in this position. It's okay that our top players are coveted. That means we've got top players. That's a good thing. But we shouldn't be in a position where we're discussing whether we should have to sell one to advance. That's the crazy thing with this PSO and financial fair play. It's done to deter teams from how dare you challenge us and to try and get better. So there's going to be changes on it, for sure. There's going to be changes on it. And the cynic inside me says changes will be in favour of certain clubs, but they have to now start pleasing the group rather than just the top end of the table.
Okay, halfway through the show, time for the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. Go to their website, skipsandbins.com. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com or telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Go to their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to United Group Travel. Go to their website, unitedgrouptravel.com. Email info@unitedgrouptravel.com or phone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. They're a local company from Morpeth and there are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button under the video. Click the thumb up to like the video and click share to share to your social media. If you want to help the channel financially, you can pay a one-off £25 fee. You get a cup, a scarf, a pen and a membership card and entry into the NUFC Matters monthly draw. Email john@nufcmatters.com for more details, or if you've got a smartphone, scan the QR code now and it takes you straight to the membership pack. We also support the food bank on this channel. Go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and you'll find the matchday bucket. You can make a donation virtually today. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify and other podcast providers. We also do events during the year. NUFC Matters Live will be at the O2 City Hall on Friday the 2nd of August for an evening with Rob Lee, one night in Antwerp. Tickets start at £15 and you can get them from ticketmaster.co.uk. An evening with the entertainers takes place on Friday the 24th of January 2025 at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House in Newcastle. Telephone 0844 249 1000 or visit the website tynetheatreandoperahouse.uk to buy tickets today. You can also catch me on the North East Footy Breakfast Show, live on Toon Radio, weekdays 7 till 9 a.m. on DAB, smart speakers, and the toonuk.com. Okay, don't forget as well, got the end of season due, 20th of July, 5 o'clock till late, and you can get your tickets for a tenner from newcastlelegends.com or nufcmatters.com. And the evening with Peter Beardsley is on the 2nd of June. Tickets are available for £19 from Woucher. And I've just stuck the link for the NFC Matters auction in the chat as well, if you want to have a go at that. Please do. Finishes next weekend. Okay, we have got quite a few questions coming in. A few people asking about the story that broke at the back end of last week. Has anybody mentioned the so-called luxury tax instead of points deductions for FFP breaches? And that was Stephen Kennedy's question as well. What's Stu and Mitch's opinion on the possible FFP rule changes? Can the lads tell us how ASM is doing in Saudi? Has he forced his way into the French side? Yeah, it's going to be quiet on the SM. It's a good question, that. But yeah, FFP rule changes, Mitch, potentially incoming. What's your thoughts on that?
All still up in the air. Luxury tax style of attitude to it is something anybody with American ownership will understand fully, because some of them have NBA and MLB teams where that can come into play. You know, that's how if they bust a salary cap, well, they just get fined. It seems that most people outside of a few teams still want to keep some sort of points deduction or sporting penalty for breaking any rules. I think it's the other challenge we're faced by making any change is then how misaligned is that with UEFA's stance, because they've been helping Barcelona and Real Madrid basically for the last 10 years. Because if we're too misaligned with that, that'll screw our team's chances in Europe. And imagine teams not able to play full squads in the Champions League, and that affects the performance. And then we start getting fewer places in the Champions League, and the country's coefficient disappears down over. Would that then push the big English clubs to say, right, Super League time? And so it's all, it's not quite 3D chess, but it's much more complicated than it looks. And any change they have to make, they've got to bear in mind that there's different sets of rules for different competitions. At the same time, though, it's quite clear that for me, basically the numbers they've got put together for the Premier League don't work, because they're many years out of date. Even if you count it just for inflation, there's not just inflation in there. There's changes within the game that's put, say, a premium on English players, for example. And it just doesn't take into account any of that. And so that's the starting point, I would imagine. But also, I think they do have to start to look at debt and how debt can come into the factor, because it seems quite remarkable that a panning Everton and Forest for going tens of millions over when you've got clubs that are billions in debt. And that just doesn't sit well.
What's your views on the new FFP suggestion, Stu?
Well, it's quite clear they're going to change it. What isn't clear is how they're going to change it. There's a lot of suggestions getting floated about, but they're going to have to be very careful, because if they get it wrong, there's going to be legal charges one way or the other, isn't it? Which then delays the process. But the European sailors, I think it's 70% is the maximum you can have on the players' salaries. I don't know if that affects transfers or not. So what that would then lead us or need us to do is what we should be doing anyway, and that would be boosting our commercial revenue. And that falls at Mr. Silverton's door. And if we're getting more and more sponsors in, that would allow us to get more and more players. You don't have to get a lot more players, but on higher wages, so you're getting the better quality. What I think what we need to be doing is more focused on how anything impacts Newcastle, because we know as soon as there's a change, it's going to get pulled apart and shown how it's favoured certain teams. But the question, if you speak to the average football fan, is how can Tottenham and Man United be nigh on £1 billion in debt, yet still be allowed to spend money when clubs who have no debt aren't allowed to spend the money? And that's not a level playing field, and that's what sport should be, where anyone can prosper at any time. And if it is restriction of trade, but it takes a gloss off it, and very slowly, where the Americanization of football is happening in front of us, and no one wants to challenge it because they keep pointing up, look what these bad people from the Middle East are doing, and they make that the narrative, while the Americans get their feet under the table and get into a position where they've got the clubs that they want, and they'll never lose money by having those clubs. If they get the TV deals and everything else, basically they become franchises, not clubs. And that's something where I can see happening in front of us, and it's not getting challenged at all, because the main people who will be challenging it are followers of the three red teams that are pushing it the most.
Okay, interesting. Of course, we'll watch that with interest. Barry says, Steve, Mitch, how many of our starting 11 would you say are 100% fit? It's been the story of our season. We touched on that earlier on, Barry, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'd say a lot of them have just pushed through the pain barrier, which is what you've got to do. So we'll not go back into that because we've already discussed it. B. Taylor says, any news on Joe Linton's contract, lads? Eddie Howe was asked about this on Friday, and he said still nothing. But I don't think that's anything to panic about, Mitch.
No, I don't think it is either. I would say nothing concrete. I don't think it's as far away as people are assuming it is.
Have you heard anything, Stu?
Yeah, just the same as last time. It's something he wants to do, and it's something the club want to do. And Amanda's now getting involved with the contract negotiations in the absence of Darren Eales. And I think it'll be sorted before the end of the season. He's definitely wanting to stay, and I think, I don't know, it might even be that close where they can't announce it until the new financial year or something because of the wage bills. You don't know how close it could be with something like that. So once they get some of these people who are out with contract off, then they can say, right, there's your extra money. But there seems to be a willingness on both sides to make sure it happens. So I'm sure it will. I'm sure they'll find a solution.
I'm no Man U fan or Spurs fan, but isn't debt part of business as well as football? Interest incurred in the respective debts is part of the expenditure factored in the FFP. PSR needs change, though, says Benny. And David says, to not allow Saudi sponsorship into Newcastle is anti-competitive and needs resolved at some point. Michael J says, surely City Group is basically a franchise already. And JC says, heard Man United chatter saying Ashworth's already been advising them to go for Southgate. Maybe we got lucky. No gossip on Tonali, David, at this moment at all. B. Taylor says, I see club keeping a close eye on Ashworth activity. And Blue Rhythm Boy, I don't believe anything you see on social media. I've seen a lot of things about various things, and I wouldn't believe everything you hear or see. Some people put stuff up there really just to cause mischief, I think. So I wouldn't believe it at all. Heard Joe Linton feels fit to play and club won't pass him fit. Are they not playing him so they can sell him and no risk of injury? Again, it's a rumour. I don't know where that's come from. We heard that, but I think what you find with this show and the Amigos in particular, you know, if you hear it from us or if you hear something that may sound as if something is, you know, if something potentially could happen, it genuinely does happen. That's why you lot like to watch this channel. But from my perspective, I wouldn't believe that at all. I wouldn't believe that kind of story at all. Michael says, look, where we've come from, injuries, transfer restrictions, etc. 7th so far this season. A lot to look forward to. How are the lads? And that's the kind of positivity where we're pushing, I guess, Mitch, because, you know, this could, somebody said yesterday, where does this stand? If Eddie Howe gets Europe this season, where does this stand in his managerial seasons at Newcastle so far? Because with all the injuries, all the negativity, and everything that surrounded him, should they get into Europe with all of this, it's got to be up there with the first 2 seasons.
I'll tell you what's revealing is you look at the treatment Ten Hag gets when he talks about how terrible season he's had with injuries.
Yeah,
and they've lost maybe about half the minutes we've lost in terms of injuries and unavailability. And the press get the violins out for him, and it's give him a break, and this, that, and the other. transfers. Compare that to us, where Eddie had about 2 minutes of that. And then after that, it was, well, he should be just getting on with it and everybody should man up and he's got to deal with it and injuries are part of football. It's difficult because it sounds like we're making excuses. But the fact is, we've missed a phenomenal, probably unrepeatable amount of time due to injuries this season. And getting to the bottom of why is why I keep coming back that we need to be doing all sorts in the close season. I saw somebody make a comment on Twitter yesterday. I'd like to see what another manager would have done with that. And maybe the only difference that another manager may have done was chuck a bit more youth at it and take a chance. But I equally see why Howe does what he does. He's got the group, he's got the dressing room at a certain point. Imagine it was a young defender that he'd chucked on against Everton, who then gave away a penalty in the 80-odd minutes. And that young defender then got, you've ruined Newcastle United season and this, that and the other on social media. That could finish a young player off. From a confidence point of view, it may take a long time for that player to come back from that. So is Eddie just reverting to somebody he knows who can do a job for him and take the flak if it doesn't go well? It's a really fine balance. It's a difficult balance. And I think that's the only difference. I think other managers might have just took a punt on youth a bit more. But I think if we manage to get Europe out of this from where we were at one point this season, particularly when we felt like we were on our knees in January, the wheels had come off in December and everything had, gone south. If we manage European qualification and have had some fantastic Champions League performances, we missed out on qualification from the group stage by, and that's chuff really, and that wasn't what people were saying we were going to do. We were going to finish bottom. We weren't going to get any points. We weren't going to do anything. Well, we did. We rattled a couple of cages. And I think we'll take out of this season quite a lot. And you do sometimes learn more from adversity and failure than you do from success. And there's that's where I'm looking at it at the minute, that if we do manage to get Europe, it is a real achievement from where we were at one point.
Where's it stand, do you think, if he gets Europe? Stu, same question to you. If he gets Europe this season, where does it stand in his first 3 seasons?
Yeah, certainly on a par with last season, I would say. We have to take the injuries into consideration. Sorry, people saying you shouldn't, but the impact it's had. Even now, with all these injuries, we had a slightly stronger bench yesterday, and that made the difference. But there's one thing, if we go back a couple of weeks ago, as you know, I was at the Man City game away, and there was nigh on 8,000 fans there. And this song that's just been created in the last 2 or 3 seasons, Who's That Team We Call United? The last line of that is, we'll support you evermore. Should that be have an asterisk and a caveat saying, but only when you're winning? We're actually going through historically one of the best seasons in the club's history, finishing where we are. It's soon to be in the top 20% of the club's history. Yeah, I think there's a big difference between the match-going fans, especially the away fans, and expectations than what you get on the very needy social medias. Like we must win this now. I was waiting for us to drop a point, and as soon as we did against Everton, the outcry was ridiculous. But then it went quiet again yesterday, and it's like people aren't happy unless they've got something to complain about. We ground out a very, very good win, an important time of our season. Take into consideration their last home game, they beat Tottenham 3-0. So to go there and nullify them as we did, and then show the will and desire to get the lead and then defend the lead, I think is very admirable and credible to the staff and the players. And it's essential for me that we get European football, because, as Mitch referred to there, we had some good highlights, especially the PSG at home. We announced ourselves back on the European stage, so any type of European football keeps getting on name seen, not just in Europe but globally as well. And then when you've got Adidas putting our shirts in stores all over the world, we start becoming like a big club again, and we need to start behaving like one. And refers back to the skyscraper that's Murdoch often mentioned. Excuse me a second. The skyscraper that Murdoch was talking about, because the foundations are firmly in place, and whether it's financial fair play or whether it's the PSR that's holding us back, the skyscraper will still get built. And if we have the collective desire off the pitch is what they've been showing on the pitch recently, then we've got nothing to worry about. We just have to wait a little bit longer than all of us would like.
Slight concern, as someone did say, an injury record for Howe's last 3 seasons at Bournemouth and his first 3 here and they were almost the same, was pointed out. He's had Wilson both times too. Could be just a comparison. It's it is a comparison. I guess we just have to wait and see what Eddie and his team come up with over the course of the next couple of months during the preseason. Injuries have had a huge impact on our season. You're right. Support when we are winning, loyal when we are not, says Les. JJ says, from a medical point, will Pope be prone to recurrence, and do we need younger keeper as cover? I think we need keeper as cover, JJ, 100%, because obviously, losing Pope, Dubravka coming in, I don't think was ideal, but you're always going to need more than one person in one position. The How Out Brigade are the same people who paid £50 for a bottle of wine. We've got 11 out of 12 players out and still pushing for Europe. That is magnificent. Neil Calvert, good morning. Personally speaking, if we get Europe again this season, for me, it's better than last season. Injuries, no January spend, more games, constantly changing teams, negativity from the media and the social media. Good point. Win, lose and draw, we support them regardless. We stand tall with them. And Jules says, a major part, Stu, is one individual on socials will take a point, for example, injury, and essentially throw it out there, encouraging others to join in, and it snowballs. Just ignore, folks.
Right.
Good point.
There's people there who I think they thrive on. I don't know whether they've lived such a shallow life on that, but they thrive on any sort of attention, and they'll say things to the point where it goes past being controversial. And what we need to do is not bite as much, and they ignore it. The team's doing well, so if people want to unsettle that, then that says more about them than it does about the team.
Yeah, an interesting comparison would be goals scored against Pope and Dubs over equal amount of games. I ignore rumours, but I've heard Hartlepool are going to buy Sunderland. Morning, lads. Do we know if 8th place is good enough for a place in Europe? I guess it depends on who wins what, does it, lads?
Yeah,
it depends on who wins what, and do we get the extra place in the Champions League?
Simple as that, and we don't know that yet, so that's it. Pretty sad that Eddie has to tell his squad to stay away from social media. This is why rational fans need to start being louder than the empty vessels. Peter Bell, if players like Willock and Longstaff are not 100% fit, then it's bound to reflect on their performances. It feels like we need 6 new players to get back to last season's levels. And David Vetch says, true, Stu, the foundations are going in. Lots of agreement with you guys as usual. Spot on, Stu. We need Europe to get the message that Newcastle are coming. And Benny says, I love it when fans sing the Eddie Howe and Jason Tyndall song. Stuff like that keeps players in line from silly buggers, downing tools for the manager. Lots of positivity in the chat this morning, which is what we want to see. And JC also says comparison was injuries sustained per 1,000 minutes was much higher than the average in the Premier League. All of these things that we've got to remember, guys.
It's not. I wouldn't even say much higher. I would say it's almost exponentially higher.
100%. I heard all the negativity about how would Pep have coped with the situation exactly that Eddie has faced this season. And in my opinion, so many YouTube football creators want to do it full time, and they stoop so low to create likes and so-called super chats. It's embarrassing. Another question. Does Barnes go to the Euros instead of Rashford? I say yes. What do you guys say? Mitch?
Not Southgate picking the team.
Exactly. That would be my answer as well. I'd rather Barnes sat at home, Stu, and concentrated on getting fit and ready for the start of next season. I've got to be perfect.
Stu want him to go with Scotland.
Exactly. I'd rather he went with Scotland if he's going. He won't get picked for England now. That seems to be a close shop, and there seems to be, for me, it's a three-way shootout for one or two places between Gordon, Rashford, and Grealish. And if you're on favoritism, Gordon's bottom of the list. If you go on form, he's top of the list. So that'll be up to Mr. Southgate. Does he want the players that were in form going, or does he want to just pick names because they played well from 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I just genuinely think that the least in Newcastle players that go away on international duty this summer, the better for me. I don't want to see anybody go. Barnes can be our super sub, proven to be the impact player we've needed off the bench for the last few months. Yeah, look, there's some positive signs in amongst all of this angst about injuries. Lewis Hall now getting a chance to have a run out. Barnes, coming back just at the right time. Sad to see Willock go, but you know what? Ultimately, Mitch, there's been so many positives, and Lewis Miley's development this season has been immense. And now Elliot Anderson coming back in and seizing his opportunity. And
he looked in patches yesterday. Anderson looked really good. The strength he's gained compared to last season that we've talked about since we saw him pre-season and the pre-season tournament. But he also made 2 or 3 lovely little moves and interplays with Gordon on the left. Particularly once we gained the upper hand in the second half in that 15-20 minute period I was talking about earlier. Barnes has got all the tools. Right foot, left foot, can cut inside and shoot, can get a deep little cross in, can fire a ball up across the box. Energy, pace, real Eddie Howe type of player, really. And yeah, I think he's officially he scored the most goals off the bench as an individual and had the most impact off the bench as an individual by pretty much every metric in the Premier League this season. And he's only played a handful of games.
Yeah. Just a quick one on Miley. Somebody's asked us about Miley there. Yeah, Eddie Howe did mention him in the press conference. Him and Trippier are both okay, as in they're not going to be out for the rest of the season, but there was no timeline, and that's interesting. You can't give a timeline on injuries. Eddie Howe says I can give you a timeline, but there's no guarantee that that'll be the timeline that they come back in, because things change, and that is it. Last question before we let Stu go. Question is, what the hell do we do with Longstaff, Anderson, or Bruno getting injury and have to come off against Spurs? There's always going to be somebody to come in, man. We'll play one of the goalkeepers in there, Stu.
Well, there was a question earlier on, will Alfie Harrison be getting his game time at this rate? Alfie Harrison's unborn son will be playing for us, the amount of injuries that will happen. So we just have to hope that the injury gods now had enough of taking the piss out when Newcastle decides to move somewhere else. Because that's what it seems like, doesn't it? It's just every game you're expecting someone to get injured, and it's become unfunny now. So hopefully, I understand the question. If one of the midfielders get injured, then we really would be short. They would have to change the formation, I would imagine, which might not be a bad thing with the players that we've got. So let's just all stay positive and ensure there's no injuries. We don't want to jinx them. So keep those players fit and let us get qualified for Europe.
And no injuries to you, Stu. You enjoy your time away, mate. It's been well deserved. You work hard for it, so have a good time. Don't drink too much.
It's tough for today, but that's the Heat's fault, as I told you at the start. Went out and watched the game, end up watching the next game, end up like a long karaoke thing. So he got his. I woke up with a bad head this morning, but I'm not a vengeful person. But I do have a plan to get him back, and I'll get him drunk today. Right, that's us in the house. Enjoy your Sunday, lads.
Thanks everybody for watching. I'm back tomorrow night, 6 o'clock with the fans forum, and as usual, 7 shows this week. A couple of them will be pre-recorded because I've got things to do this week, but there will be 7 shows. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and congratulations to Gateshead, off to Wembley again. Could be going to Wembley twice in the space of a week, Tom, if the league form continues. So well done to the Heat. Great stuff. But Mitch, Stu, thanks very much, lads. Take care. See you soon.
Cheers everyone.